All right. Um, Today's webinar is the New York State Consolidated Funding Application, or also known as the CFA. Thrilled to welcome you and our speaker this afternoon. Could you please let us see your name and organization? Rename yourself if necessary, but I think everybody had their names on there. Upcoming webinar programs free for members. Our next program will be on July 8th at 3 p.m. Please note the different time. Normally we're at noon, but we're changing it up because the speaker wasn't available that day at noon. Will feature a presentation on the threats to federal funding with Sarah Sadian. I'm not sure I pronounced her name right, from the National Council of Nonprofits. So that should be well worth everyone's time. And our next connections call for members will be on August 13th at 8:30 a.m. If you're not a member, and I think everybody here is, but if you paid for this event, we'll happily apply that fee to membership. So if you want to use the code SAVE30, we'll put in the chat the link to join if you wish to do that. We'll distribute an email with the recording with any slides to register participants after this, and it usually takes about a week. And these materials, of course, are always available on the GPLH member only section of the website. We'll be sending out a short survey after this program as well. Please respond to it if you can. And please mute yourself until the end. We will monitor chat for questions throughout the program. There will be time for Q&A at the end. I am pleased to introduce today's speaker, Susan Matheson, president of SAM Fundraising Solutions. Susan has had an extensive museum career. As a textile conservator, she worked at the Smithsonian Institution and the National Gallery of Art. She learned fundraising and grant writing during her tenure as administrative conservator at the Conservation Center, NYU's too many C's, Conservation Training Program. She has also held grants positions at the American Museum of Britain, Meet the Composer, and the American Academy of Rome. In 2007, she founded SAM Fundraising Solutions, a consultancy specializing in fundraising for art conservation and historic preservation. Her clients range from major arts institutions to grassroots groups. She has served on several boards, is currently a member of the Metropolitan Museum of Textile Conservation Lab Visiting Committee. I think I got that right. It seems every June and July, Susan is writing several New York State Parks Historic Preservation or Empire State Development grants. To date, she has won grants from the Renee and Chaim Gross Foundation, Baird Cutting Arboretum, and the Her Center for Immigrant Culture and History, the RIY, and the Friends of the Connecticut State Park and Preserve. So Susan, take it away.
Okay, give me 1 second because I have to figure out the whole sharing of the slides thing. There we are. Okay, can everybody see my slides? All good?
In a minute.
Okay.
Here we go.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, there we go. Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Many thanks to GPLH and thank you to everyone who joined today. Maureen, can you mute? Sorry. I'm hearing bounce back from somebody. Thank you. I just always like to start off this by saying what this webinar is not. This is not about how to complete the CFA application. There are loads of webinars out there in both the Regional Economic Development Council pages, the various grant programs, and all of that can talk to you about how to populate and submit the application. What I'm going to do today is go over a few of the application programs, but more importantly, I'm going to give you a few tips on how to develop a successful application. So first off, what is the CFA, the Consolidated Funding Application? And this is sort of a pooling together of the grants of several state agencies. So you can apply to a variety of agencies through one application portal. And these come out every summer. They usually are announced in May. This year they came out late because the state budget was delayed, and they're always due at the end of July. Basically, what you can do is when you go into the application, you answer a series of threshold questions, and that will tell you which agency's applications your project is eligible for. The key to these is that they are decided by regional economic development councils. So these are economic development grants. So you need to keep that in mind when you're doing your application. And I'll go through some of that as I talk about how I answer questions and things. Now, if you're going to, now why isn't my slide moving? Sorry. I'm going to go back for a minute um, because it seems like for some reason, let me do this. Okay, now are you seeing that? Okay. Sorry, I apologize for this.
We're seeing like the whole thing if that's what you want us,
Yeah, I
everything on
know.
the
I'm
slide.
trying. No,
Okay.
I'm not. I'm trying to. There. Okay. Ah, there we go. Okay. Thank you. Got it working now. Technology, ain't it great? Um, First thing to realize when if you're considering applying for one of these is that they are reimbursable grants, not matching, as it's often referred to. You have to spend the money first and then request the funds. And reimbursements can be requested throughout the entire project to help you maintain cash flow. Um, Typically, these require a 50% match. The state will only cover 50% of your total project budget. Now, this is unless you are in a high poverty area. And in that case, you may qualify for 75% of state funding for your project. And I'll go into explain some of this later when I start giving examples. Um, Having the sort of matching funds in place or the money you can use to spend out and get reimbursed um, isn't required, but it does help strengthen your application. Now, you're going to hear me saying a lot of new for 2026 because there were a few changes to this year's. One of the things is that some, not all of the programs require certification that you, as the applicant, have a gender-based violence in the workplace policy. This is new. Parks program is requiring it. I'm not sure some of the other ones are as well. So you have to show that you have a written policy for this. If you don't, then you need to submit a statement in lieu of the certification, attesting that you intend to adopt such a policy. So that's one of the many new things this year. In preparing for this, one of the things I did is I went through sort of all the nonprofit eligible programs that are part of the CFA this year. Um, and because not all of them are. So you really have to watch that. And I'm going to start with some of the ones that I'm not discussing in depth only because I'm not sure many in the audience qualify for these or would be considering them, but I still think I'd be remiss if I didn't mention them. The first is the New York's Main Street program, and this is about for nonprofits that have been providing relevant service to the community for at least a year. So you're part of a larger initiative within your community. And this is about a downtown revitalization. It's about projects that provide economic development and housing opportunities in downtown mixed-use commercial districts. So let's say you're looking to build a childcare center or something along those lines, and there's a strip mall being built. It's sort of your involvement in that construction of that strip mall. So you may be applying for this with the developer of that. Smart Growth Community Planning Program is about, excuse me, developing local planning initiatives that advance key state priorities, such as climate resilience, affordable housing, and expanded access to childcare, which is done in partnership with the Office of Children and Family Services. And I know some of you apply for their grants. So this is about adopting and planning, zoning strategies in support of the Smart Growth Community Program goals. The Canal Grantway Program is for canal projects. I don't think we have anybody doing construction on canals here. And then there's the Achieve, which is sort of a Red Sea re-grant program. So I highly recommend talk to your Red Sea, which is the Regional Economic Development Council. It's the acronym for it. And see if they're applying for any partners that you may be able to partner with them to do. Um, Everybody in the states eligible this year except Long Island, the Mohawk Valley, the Southern Tier, and New York City, because they got these grants last year. So, and you can't have grants for 2 years in a row. The next one that's new for 2026, which I think is hilarious, is the New York Kicks, which is a World Cup Legacy Investment Fund. And this one is about, launched because we're having the World Cup this year. And this is about investing in soccer infrastructure for disadvantaged communities. It's the creation, expansion, and improvement of publicly accessible community soccer fields. It's long term. This is not building a soccer field for the duration of the World Cup. And you can be a nonprofit, a municipality, and a public authority to apply for these. If you are a school or a university, you're not eligible, but you can be if you partner with one of the eligible nonprofits. So I think they're viewing, as I said, it's community accessible. So, a school field may not be viewed as such. So that's that, which again, I think is just great that they're doing that. Okay, so let's get into sort of the meat of things. The Economic Development Capital Grant Program, which was the Regional Council Capital Grants Program, again, due for 2026. Sadly, once again this year, they're not offering the nonprofit version of this, which was great because you could easily get 100,000. But this year, again, they're not doing it. I don't know if it's ever going to be reinstated, quite frankly, from what I've been hearing. Of note, these grants were usually received on a rolling basis throughout the year, but they've changed that this year, and they're looking for all of the applications to be part of the CFA. If you're going to apply outside of the grant cycle, the CFA grant cycle, they'll look at yours, but only on a case-by-case basis. Um, and minimum grant is 100,000 and they go up to a couple of million, and these are intended for new construction renovation that increase capacity and support job creation or job retention, reduce unemployment, stimulate economic activity, and strengthen communities. Now, a few words of warning, because they're not doing the nonprofit anymore. These are highly competitive, and as I said, nonprofits tend not to win them. But I suggest don't take that as disheartening. Go and look at last year's awardees. They're on the Red Sea page for your region. And see if your project aligns with one who has won an award. Also, talk to the folks at Empire State Development. They're great, they're fabulous to work with. And let's sound them out too about your project and see if it's competitive. Lastly, as a word of warning, read the terms and conditions, the T and Cs and the guidelines carefully before you consider applying. As I refer to these as expensive grants, there's a lot of reporting and investment requirements that come along with taking one of these grants. So make sure you're able to handle all of the sort of investment and things that they require. Okay, ESD's funding priorities. We have three: business investment, economic growth investment, and tourism. This, thankfully, has not changed. Business investment is designed to help employers create new jobs in the state and retain jobs that may be at risk. So again, it's about new construction, facility expansion, and renovation, but it's looking towards those that increase your production capacity. So let's say, if you're looking to expand your workshop areas or your factories and that kind of thing, because that allows you to hire more people to work in that larger space. Um, and sort of these kinds of jobs, looking at creating and retaining, are looked on much more favorably. And you have to demonstrate that you're able to maintain those create job creation, employment goals for at least 5 years after the grant is completed. So, you're going to need to document number of jobs retained, number of full-time jobs being created, and salaries associated with those provisions. Economic growth investment is about fostering the broader economic development within a community or region. So they're looking at cultural activities, higher education projects, agribusiness investments, redevelopment, and all of that to sort of really do a much more regional you're looking at not only expanding, growth locally, you're looking at growth in the surrounding area, that will encourage additional investment in the area and generate economic activity. And the last is tourism. And here's another new for 2026. The tourism capital projects were always part of the Market New York program. This year they have split them out. So the capital projects now fall under the Development Capital Grant Program for tourism. And Market New York is still around, but that's strictly for promotion. And I'll get to that in a minute. So this is about capital investments that expand, construct, restore, and renovate tourism destinations and attractions throughout the state. So, if you want to build a visitor center for your park or your historic site, that kind of thing. And it's looking at projects that must increase visitor numbers, visitor spending, and length of stay in hotel rooms. So, and you have to be able to give clear performance measures and demonstrate strong return on investment to win one of these. And when I talk about Market New York, I'll talk about that in a minute. But this is strictly the capital. So this is new facilities and construction around that. The strategic focus of ESD this time around, again, it's the same. It's the child care. So it's access to high quality childcare. It's creating new childcare slots, affordable market rate, all of those things to basically improve a capital project to improve access to high quality childcare. And you're going to have to demonstrate the community need for these services, whether the project is located in a child care desert, and you can find out whether or not your project is in a child care desert. I believe it's on the ESD's website or their CFA website. And populations that will be served and the broader economic benefits, which, if parents have high quality childcare, both of them can work, and high quality and affordable childcare, both of them can work. Therefore, then they have higher salaries that they can, use back in the community through shopping and all that sort of stuff. Investment in distressed areas. It's again, those sort of areas. And you really need to demonstrate the need for financial assistance and a positive economic and community impact if you're going down, if you're focusing your project on that strategic focus. And the last one is innovative public-private partnerships. And this is sort of collaborations with higher ed businesses, public sector partners to advance innovation, research, workforce development, and economic growth again. So if you are partnering with a business, if you're doing educational programs for employees or kids of employees, that kind of thing, this is where it fits in. And you need to build something or renovate something in order to do that. You grow that program better. You really need to be clear that this is a partnership, that community value is not from just one partner doing everything and the other one's sort of a partner in name only. There needs to be a demonstrated equitable distribution of the work scope. Now, how do you win one of these? Again, they ask a lot about the project as a regional economic priority, fitting into the Red Sea strategy, project description and work scope. But key to these is they're not treated as a capital project or a grant. They're treated as an investment in the community and in your organization. So they're investing in your capital project as a way to foster that growth, and that will in turn better serve the community and by extension, the state. So don't refer to it as a grant, refer to it as an investment. And as you see from last year's winners, if you look at that list, for-profits tend to win these awards. So approach your narratives and your responses as a for-profit, not a nonprofit. So this therefore becomes not about making the case for a charitable venture. It's about making the case for a business venture. So you need to kind of recraft and rethink of your how you present your project that way. Narrative needs to justify the state's investment again, um, and you need to really fulfill one of those priorities and one of those areas of strategic focus. And to do that, you need to set up, back up all your claims with data. So I do the childcare one because it's a nice way to show how this can be framed. So you're looking at your area, you have X number of children now, but Y of them have inadequate childcare, X number of childcare spots, but the true need is this. You're currently serving this number of children. With the project, it'll increase to a higher level. You have, how not the competition, but sort of your other child care facilities nearby. What are the parents' options for that? How will this increase the number of child care facilities that are available to parents? Um, and because of the average salary in the area is whatever it is, that you're offering financial assistance. So you're offering affordable rates and market rates. So you can help those who might not be able to afford it. The second that comes in with this too is whether or not your organization has the capacity to take on the project and sustain it after it's completed. So they will ask for and look at your financial statements. They ask questions about your organizational history, your existing services, your staff, and your leadership. And they will ask about your organization's investment in the project. So once you get this structure built or renovated or what have you, what are your game plans to sustain all of this afterwards? Um, so they will be a lot of questions about existing staff numbers and salaries and what your projected new positions will be, how many of them, and what the salaries for those positions will be. Market New York. So again, this is now separated out. And again, it is about um, projects that bolster regional and statewide tourism. So it's not just about the local benefit. And key to this is aligning with not only the Red Sea strategic plan, but the state's tourism strategy through I Love New York. So you really need to look through and read that strategic plan as well. And it's really dull, I'll warn you now. Um, and this is about supporting key tourism pillars such as world-class destination and major events, attracting meetings and conferences, because that fills up hotel rooms, expanding international visitation, so what you're doing to promote New York State abroad, highlighting outdoor recreation opportunities, and also developing collaborative regional tourism campaigns. So maybe you're in one Red Sea and you can work with someone in another Red Sea, so it expands the benefits of your tourism promotion. And the eligible expenses, include things like media advertising, marketing campaigns, print and digital content, websites, professional services, um, event amenities such as staging and security, um, and things of this sort. It can't be limited administrative expenses. It cannot be used for general operating expenses. So staff salary, construction projects, equipment purchases do not fly under this program. So how do you win one of these? Again, making sure you meet the tourism goals corresponding to Red Sea and the I Love New York. Documenting regional impact, measurable visitor growth, strong partnership, and alignments are key to winning this. And this success is measured through measurable outcomes such as room nights generated, visitor frequency, visitor spending, length of stay. So you want to be able to show increases of all in all of these areas as a result of your project. And, so and all of that. Now, one of the things this grant, not project, but this grant requires is the submission of a marketing plan up to 15 pages. And a successful plan will include an outline of the opportunity, like why this project, why now? Why are you looking for state funds? What are you promoting? It's not about this is not about tourism for tourism's sake. That's not what this grant is about. So, for example, I did one of these a couple of years ago, and it was about a birth anniversary of the owner of the historic house. And so we were able to lay out a variety. Not only were we looking to promote it as the celebration of this birth anniversary, but we had developed a whole slew of programs around it that could be used to attract and increase tourism. In this plan, you need to lay out who your audience is. You need to do a professional audience survey, and that because you need to reference it, and sometimes you do submit it because they not only want to know where your current audience and users are coming from, but where you anticipate the new audiences will be coming from and why. They want to know about audience familiarity with your site and how people are learning about you. Some people know about it, but they don't, not a lot, who are very, very, loyal and devoted and constantly visit the site. How many people have expressed interest in visiting but haven't yet? And, what are your plans to change that? A core marketing strategy is also a key component of this. And they want a concrete timeline with affiliated costs. So when are you running your ad campaigns? Where are you running them? And what milestone events or benchmarks are you going to be using to promote your new your new building, promoting the opportunity? That's what I want to say. And then there's also promotional materials, including those what are beyond the obvious. Are you using banner ads anywhere on, others websites, local websites and that kind of thing, the towns and that kind of thing. Are you using geofencing? Are you using native lands? Are you retargeting to other areas? All of that is key to really show that you are able to say, okay, we have, X number of tourists coming through. We anticipate Y coming through as a result of our promotional efforts. We anticipate, these people coming and staying in the area in these hotels. Heritage tourists, at least in the case of this project, tend to come, stay longer, and spend more. So how much longer are they coming to stay? How much more are they going to spend? All of that becomes integral part of this plan and bolsters your chances of winning one of these. Next up are the ones that I do the most of, obviously, given my background. And these are the parks, Environmental Protection Fund grants. And these support the acquisition, planning, development, and improvement of parks and historic properties. Now, new this year is the ownership. They're sort of having you've always had to document ownership in the past, but this year the Parks Department's getting a little more tight about this. And basically, if you own your property, you're fine. If you don't, do you have some sort of memorandum of understanding with the owner that will allow you to do this work? And I run through this a lot. I work with a lot of the friends groups of state parks. And so we have an MOU with the Parks Department that allows the friends group to accept the grants, to apply for grants, to do the work. Now, key in this is if the MOU is not as long as the life expectancy of the work, which for the Parks Department is 25 years, there needs to be a plan in place that outlines who is responsible for sustaining the work after the MOU expires. So a lot of times the friends group, it's 5 years and they just keep renewing them. But if, you think, oh, okay, well, a friends group or whoever, or we're only going to stay in this space for 10 years. Well, okay, the state's paid for all this work. How is that the owner going to sustain it? What's the plan to sustain it after that? Um, okay, so there's three eligible grant categories for this. The parks, which is the development, preservation, improvement of parks and recreational facilities, such as playgrounds, tennis courts, ice rinks, gardens, a new construction within. I've won one of these for a visitor center at one of the parks. Historic preservation is that's the one I do most of the time, is for those buildings on the National Register of Historic Places. If you're not on the register or your application is currently being considered and will be decided in the September meeting, you can apply. And then heritage area programs, and that is within the parks, designated heritage areas throughout the state. I don't know if we have anybody here. I think there's some, there is some along the Hudson Valley, along the river, but there is a map on the parks website that lays all of that out. So again, how do you win one of these? And again, I'm focusing on this program mainly because it's the one I do the most of, but a lot of the tips I'll be talking about are applicable to the other programs as well. So the first is, again, making sure you fit the Parks Commissioner's priorities. And again, new ones for 2026, because everything's new. So this is about, building and improving amenities that promote recreation. So this is about walkable public spaces, recreational facilities, community gardens, anything that will get people out and about into the parklands of the state. And again, as always, underserved neighborhoods will get strong consideration. Trail connectivity, this is, bicycle, pedestrian access, creating stronger links between parks, greenways, historic sites, and waterways. Climate resilience and sustainability through open space preservation. This is looking at habitat restorations, flood mitigation, and climate adaptive infrastructure. I have one client who has a beach state park, and they're looking at the shoreline in this area. And then there's also advancing accessibility and inclusion by removing barriers and expanding opportunities. And this not only includes ADA compliant, wheelchair ramps and that sort of thing, but it's also looking at multilingual and interpretive signage and facilities that serve people of diverse abilities. So it's accessibility on a much wider scale. Um, and again, getting these is also about aligning with the Red Sea Strategic Plan. And again, they're on the Red Sea's website for your region. It's a boring read, but read through each section to see where your project aligns. So as I said, I mainly work in historic sites, and often these, fit into the Red Sea's strategies for improving access to culture and improving tourism. But there's also goals around improving education, quality of life issues, attracting tech and other industries, and job creation. So there are other areas that your project may also fit into as well, not just the obvious. And, in my case, you have to remember great parks, cultural resources, all of that attract better employees who go work in the local businesses, thus improving allow for the economic growth of the local businesses. So it sort of becomes presenting a ladder of how your project isn't just, a new playground or restoring a historic site or building a visitor center. It actually impacts further up the ladder as you go along. Now, where do you go to get info to support and prepare and support? And again, CFA pages, Red Sea pages for guidance. But what I love about the parks is they have several pages with lots of information and forms and such that you need. So on here, on the parks pages, and I'll give you the links in a minute, there are on the resources page are the parks plans. So you have SCORP, which is the statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan. So let's say you're doing a soccer field or you're doing something, something outside. You can pull information from that that helps justify the state funding your project. The state historic preservation plan, also again, as I've cited before, has a lot of information. Statewide trails heritage area management plans, and all of that. And then they have the ZCTA, which I can never say fast enough, for poverty levels. And before you think, oh, I'm not in a poverty level, go check out. It's arranged by zip code. And I have a client who I'll get to in a bit that is located in the West Village. Affluent neighborhood. No, it's actually the West Village falls under the state's poverty level. So that client qualified for the 75% state funding, not the 50%. So they only had to match 25, which was great for them. So really double check and look. Da, 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 da. And then also to look at local, because you'll need to cite that as well. So look at your local comprehensive plans, things through the Chamber of Commerce, tourism agencies, economic impact reports. They are out there. Now, here are your two links. The resources is the first link. The second link is the parks has their own page for the consolidated funding application. And that has a wealth of information too. It's where you will find that ZCTA. But there are other things you might need, like environmental review forms. The state requires those, particularly if you're doing new construction and you're breaking ground and you have to do archaeology work, which is a requirement. They have sample authorizing resolutions. After you receive one of these grants, you do have to have a board resolution that allows gives authority for someone to receive the funds and administer the grant. So there's a sample there. You don't have to make it up. Work detail outlines to show you how to set it up so the states like it. Sample endorsement letters. And I don't talk a lot about endorsement letters, but they do help if you have support letters. They do help make a case. And I usually suggest getting support letters from, local officials, local electives, federal, if you can get them these days. Schools, people who are using your services and that kind of thing. There's photography tips because you do have to submit pictures as well. So they're all sort of there and can guide you. So regardless of what program you're applying to, I recommend that. So we've gone over, now you get a pretty picture, typical resources for answering the questions, but what can you do to make your application unique? And I thought the best way to do this would to take a few questions. I've done this before and I've changed it up a little bit, demonstrate how I've answered them and what resources I've used and how to present the data. So I'm doing some former clients and current clients projects to do this. So this, some of you have seen in the past, this is the Connecticut State Park Preserve. And I'm bringing this back because it brings up the access issue and how we use that to win an award. And this was a sportsman's club for the Gilded Age notables that is now a state park. And one of the buildings at this park is one of the first fish hatcheries in the country. It's the hatchery that introduced brown trout to this country. It's built in the mid-19th century. And several years ago, we had it was closed because of an outbreak of infectious pancreatic necrosis, which is a virus that impacts trout, but not humans. And we had to shut down the hatchery as a result and clean it out. But instead of just making it about cleaning out the hatchery, we turned it into a education project as well. So we developed it not only as a hatchery using clean water technology, which is a whole other thing unto itself, but also as a new educational resource. We changed the layout and things so we could use that to bolster biology and environmental education. So the statement of need is the first question. This question is not about local need. You're looking at the need in the larger region and why the state should fund it. So you have to give them the justification. And what I described in our application were the losses as a result of the hatchery closure. The preserve suffered an economic downturn, and they were having a visitation of about 200,000 a year. It had dropped down to about 20, so substantial. So they were losing like 300,000 in lost profits, which could be documented through the decreased visitation, but also the drop in local businesses and their profits. We were able to talk to them. So, if you can't fish, no one's going to the local tackle shop to buy tackle. They're not coming to the area to fish, so they're not going to the restaurants and the hotels and all of that. And then I was also to cite the Trust for Public Lands report on the economic benefits and fiscal impact of parks and open space in Nassau and Suffolk counties. Like I say, Google it. These reports are all out there, and they're great for documenting and giving you the information you need to justify your case. And that report said that 28% of non-resident visitors come to visit heritage site. And remember, the fishery is not only working, it's a heritage site. And they spend 615 million and generate 27.3 million in sales tax revenues every year. So they determined that with interesting sites to visit, and dynamic educational programs to attend, tourists will come to these sites on Long Island and generate revenue for Long Island. So the hatchery restoration became a means of bringing back the fishermen who were coming to the park for the recreational and historic activities. So again, you're not looking at site importance, you're demonstrating it through data. Then we come the local need question. And this is not asking the same question as above. It's a completely different question. So, but in answering it, I build on what was said in the last question, but then I introduce different information and data to further along the argument and fit it back both to the state and the commissioner's priorities. So, based on anecdotal information, we could say that almost 80% of the visitors go to the park to see the hatchery, and they have stopped because there's nothing there to see, and anglers were not going to pay to go fish but not catch anything. And we had several of the local angling groups, express their frustration at the hatchery closure and were now going elsewhere to fish. So we really needed the hatchery to be restored and brought and reopened to bring them back. And to further that, some of the angling groups actually gave to the project. So we were able to show community support. And that further made our argument for local need. Key to this, and this goes back to access, is the park. Connecticut is one of the few handicapped accessible fishing sites in the state. So handicapped, we were no longer serving the handicapped anglers. So, we were going back to that saying, we need this hatchery back to serve this, give access to this community. Also, too, is the preserve was losing their volunteer corps. Those who were taught teaching programs and ran the hatchery, they were moving on to other projects, other organizations. And remember, a volunteer corps counts as full-time equivalent employees. So in a way, we were losing, people, employees at the park as a result of this. Um, the closure also curtailed the use of the preserve by educational outlets. So school field trips, BOCES programs, university courses, family programs were either canceled or greatly reduced. They were estimated at one point to be down to over 1,000 programs annually. And this was a huge detriment to community youth and residents as they were losing this opportunity to see, be part of and experience Long Island's natural habitat. And then additionally, the lack of fish was disrupting the normal life cycles of the Connecticut River. We were losing birds that fed on the fish. So the herons, the egrets, the osprey, other critters that fed on the fish. But also, too, if we kept the hatchery open with the virus, the river feeds into the Great South Bay. So we ran the risk of the virus going into the bay and being a much larger issue than it could have been. And thus, we were also fulfilling watershed management practices and programs and goals within the state. Now, this is York Hall. And this is the Nissequogue River State Park Foundation. And what they are doing, it's another Friends of group, and what they are doing is looking for funding to refurbish and remediate this York Hall, which is a historic performing arts space located at the former Kings Park State Hospital campus, which is now what the state park is on. So when you go, all of the hospital buildings are still there, and then the parks around it. It's actually kind of cool. And what we're doing is we're taking this, restoring it, adaptively reusing it into a multicultural and recreational facility that will be open year-round for public programming and events, as well as interpretive displays and exhibitions that tell the story of the site's evolution from hospital to state park. And it's the only state park in the system that has that history. So it's been vacant and largely abandoned since 96. It's, as you can see, it's in really sad shape because of deferred maintenance. The roof had issues, the leaks destroyed the plasterwork. You can just see it's a mess. So the foundation's plan is to restore it and maintain the historic features, like those lovely grates you can see to the side of the stage on the left. And reconfigure it again as a theater space for not only the park but the community. Now, this is also the theater that the hospital's patients would, that's where they would put on shows, and it would be used for community meetings and school graduations. So in restoring this to a community center, we're acknowledging the historic use of the building as well. So it's a very nice package. So what makes this an economic priority for the region? And so what I do is I went back and looked at, because it's arts and that's my background, sort of looking at studies by Americans for the Arts, the Long Island Arts Alliance. And it said that nonprofit arts and cultural organizations generate over 330 million in economic activity on Long Island, and that was in 2022, and supports nearly 5,000 local jobs. Arts sector also fosters social cohesion, and 92% of survey attendees agreed that arts activities inspire neighborhood pride. And the York Hall Restoration Project, we were able to say, generates jobs in specialized construction trades. So you're not only getting, we got asbestos, so it's the abatement and all of that, but you have historic features that require different techniques. So you have not only general construction, you have specialized trades working together in the building, and that's all those jobs. But then afterwards, when it's open, there's long-time employment opportunities for people to run the programming, they run the operations, maintain the facility, and all of that. So we have sort of short-term, and then we have much longer-term jobs. Similarly, the job project will also create opportunities for youth apprenticeships, teaching artists, partnerships with local schools, theaters, and nonprofits, supporting work development in the creative sector. Now, why the creative sector is important is that the arts and culture is the third, some of you have heard me say this, is the third largest contributor to our nation's GDP. So we only fall behind health and human services and tourism. I'm sorry, retail. So we are more than agriculture, mining, manufacturing, all of that. So this is why an arts facility is important, and it's important to generate economic growth. Now, this is why you want to go. Many of the questions talk about, how do your project fulfill state plans, including, the state historic preservation plan and that kind of thing. But then they also ask about the local plans. So they're looking for that evidence. And so when I answer these, I not only cite the source, I give page numbers. And you are asked, when you respond to this question, you are asked to submit the pages from those reports with your application, stuff highlighted. So they want to see it. Are we almost at 12:55? Oh, goodness. So what I do is I looked at the framework for the future, which was the Suffolk County's master plan, comprehensive master plan, which had a lot of sort of the protection of historic and cultural resources. And we were able to say that we fulfilled all of these objectives, historic assets. We had balanced growth and preservation and all of that. We also looked at the 2024 Kings Park Downtown Revitalization Master Plan, which clearly highlighted the park itself, but also the friends, and they pulled them out as an example of a successful organization that was helping um, revitalize Kings Park. All right, so last question. I'll do this quickly because I want to make sure we have time for stuff, and I can stay a little over one. Um, this is the Gross Foundation, the Greeningheim Gross Foundation, and it's a historic artist's home and studio. So you can see where he worked and you can see the living spaces where the family lived. It is a step back in time to the 50s and 60s in the village. And it is interpretive with his historic art collection. And the question I always bring up for this is the public benefit. And that obviously is the educational mandate. We went to this and won a grant for the restoration of the facade and the roof. And the argument we made was that everything was leaking, causing damage to the art collection. And because of that, we could not if people couldn't come and see the arts on view because there was leaking, then they weren't getting that benefit of seeing, the art objects on view within their historic context, which is something that you don't often find. So it was that educational mandate. But also key to this is the largest audience of the foundation is seniors because the appeal of the time capsule effect. It invokes memories, and that is particularly important benefit for visitors with cognitive loss. So because that engagement in a period room can help stimulate memory. And the last thing was one of the great things the foundation does is an access program that uses touch, drawing, and movement to give vision impaired audiences a means of exploring the process of creating sculpture through his work. So it's controlled touch of some of his sculptures and that kind of thing. But if the structure's not sound, we can't offer this free program that sells out every month. So. All right. I think I made it. Any questions? And I can stop sharing.
No questions.
That's, was it that comprehensive? Everybody got everything?
I have to say, I thought it was pretty comprehensive. So helpful, in terms of orienting it as an investment and economic development instead of a charitable endeavor. Very important. And also the data sources because to me, that's the really tough part is where do we find the data, especially nowadays? What's going on with the census? Where do we find the data?
Where do you find the data? And it is, as I jokingly say, it would be lovely if the president understood the importance of, what we do in terms of the GDP and all of that. I mean, a lot of what I have been talking to because of a lot of the threats to the 501c3 and everything is really looking at that charitable impact in terms of how we present things, particularly coming from the museum world. It's always, it's about the objects and this, that, and the other thing. But okay, well, what's going to happen? Where's the charity? How are you serving the community? And Martin has a question. Yes.
Hi. Hi. Thank you. So yeah, this was super helpful and very comprehensive. So my question is, I'm just thinking about the scale of the project and whether you have a kind of opinion about, I know it's probably hard to generalize and there's so many different kinds of things that they fund, but for example, the Empire State Development grants, do they look for any particular scale in terms of the, size and numbers of the community impacted?
No, really. I mean, it's always goes back to that underserved communities. And again, look at your ZCTA to see if you are one without thinking you are one. But I have done them, for childcare centers, and that were, the data. And again, this is going back chaos we're dealing with now. But, they got it, but it was really making sure that we were able to say all of that. So it's not necessarily looking for big scale in terms of the size of your project. This was not a big childcare center, but it was the economic impact of it. Again, it goes back to looking at it as a business investment, not
Right. Okay.
a charitable investment. It's not about the childcare center isn't the issue. It's how is it going to improve the economic growth of that
The ripple
community?
effect. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. All
So
right.
that's
Thank
why you
you.
really, yeah, you really have to look and say, okay, again, as I said before, if this no additional parents can now become dual income households because they have high quality, affordable childcare, then that's now two salaries. They have more, extra cash, so to speak, to spend in the community. Um, and that kind of thing. And that will help, the
Got
local
it.
restaurants, the local shops, all of that, as opposed to just the stuff they need to get by,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
and all of that.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Sure,
Thank you.
sure.
Oh, if I don't know if anybody has anything they want to say in addition to comments before we go. So, well, I just want to say, first of all, thank you so much, Susan, because I know this is about the CFA, but to me, it's very helpful in terms of other things as well, because I know that I'm not doing a CFA, but I am going to be doing a different sort of application. And I just find that all the information you've given is food for thought for me about how I'm going to approach this
Mhm.
other, thing that's not federal, it's not state, but it is
Yeah,
quasi-governmental, it is economic development, and it is just so helpful. Also the way that just all the things that you picked out, like with the cognitive
the
impairment,
memory. Yeah, in
the
memory and seeing.
benefits, everything with the aspect of a leak, things that could easily be dismissed or go by the wayside, recognizing the impact of those on programs
Mhm.
and on the local economy and, the state economy, I think is just really key, to be able to see that. So it's very helpful to hear your perspective. So thank you very, very much.
Sure, happy to do it, as always.
All right. And so in closing, I just want to remind everybody that we have another webinar coming up on July 8th, which is the federal, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong thing and I have to find the right thing. I'm sorry, I'm not finding the title. So it is about the impact of federal policies on federal grants and on us. So please join us on July 8th if that's something that's affecting you or you think will affect you and you want to know what's happening from the horse's mouth. Susan Sadian from the Council on Nonprofits nationally. So she's a really important person who has a lot to offer. And that again will be at 3 p.m., which is a different time for us on July 8th. And Sarah Sadian from the National Council of Nonprofits. Lastly, we're going to have our next Connections call on August 13th at 8:30. So both of those things are good to look forward to. If anybody else wants to say anything before we go, please jump in. Otherwise, Susan, thank you once again, and I wish everyone on this call luck
Thank
with your
you.
applications.
Good
All right, take
afternoon.
care,
Bye-bye.
everybody. Bye now. I am trying to end this without doing anything bad to the recording, so just bear with me a minute here.